It is I, the Malik Aaron, and welcome back to Box Office Recaps. So, June 2023. What do you want me to say? I mean, there's plenty of things I can say about June. I guess I might as well just be quick and blunt. It sucked. It sucked. It was ass. It was a disaster for the most part. Now, not every movie in June tanked, but a very large majority of them did. And it got to a point where people were questioning, like, what's going on? What is happening? Because, like, it's one thing to have a bomb here and there, it's another thing to have multiple bombs in a row or have multiple bombs released at the same time. That is concerning to the point where people are actually making videos about what was going on. I think Penguin Z0, aka Moist Critical, aka Charlie, he made a video like, why is every movie flopping? So it's serious when he's talking about it. Um, so yeah, June was rough, very rough, and now I have to talk about all of it. So let's go. So as usual, I'm gonna be comparing my own personal predictions to what actually happened. So that's how I do it. So let's start. So June 2nd, that's where things start. And the thing is, June actually got off to a really good start. It got off to a very positive start, a great start, which gave me like false optimism for the rest of the month. But yeah, look at like the first weekend of June, it wasn't bad. But before we talk about the big winner of the month, because we all know what it is, okay, we gotta talk about the other movie that came out that weekend. That movie being The Boogeyman, because we have to do this in alphabetical order. So, The Boogeyman, the latest Stephen King movie, or Stephen King adaptation. I did not have high expectations for this. I predicted an opening weekend of like 10 million and a final total of like 20 to 30 million because I felt like no one was talking about this movie. Got like no serious. I mean, the industry tried to hype it up, but in the grand scheme of things, no one really cared that much. So I thought that was a sign of doom. But it did overperform a little bit. It opened with 12.3 million, so it actually exceeded my low expectations. And it had really good legs. It's made like 43 million domestic, which isn't like a bad result. It's not a great result, but yeah, its legs were really good, at least until recently, because now it's pretty much out of theaters. And on a budget of like 35 million, 82 million worldwide. That's not bad. Again, it's not great, but it's not bad. So I would label the Boogeyman's performance as okay. That's the best I can. That's the best I can say. It did okay, and that's pretty much it. So, yeah. So that was the Boogeyman. Now, Spider Verse. Spider Man Across the Spider Verse. Okay. Of all the June movies, this is the one that I thought was an absolute safe bet when it came to success for multiple reasons. The fact that this was the sequel to Into the Spider-Verse, which didn't set the world on fire, like financially, still did well for itself, but what was really important was its reputation, because its reputation was very strong to a point where it won the Best Animated Film Oscar. More people discover it over time. It grew a large fandom, and it's actually, the movie became pretty much influential for other animated movies that have come out in the last few years. Movies like Mitchell's versus the Machines, The Bad Guys, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and soon Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem. All those movies clearly, were inspired by Into the Spider-Verse. So naturally, you make a sequel to Into the Spider-Verse, people were going to be a lot more interested. There's going to be a lot more hype. And I could tell this movie was going to be a big deal because obviously superhero movies have not been doing that great recently, with the exception of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. That did well. But between like Guardians 3 like besides Guardians 3, this is the one where I thought superhero fatigue is not gonna hurt this movie one bit, and it didn't. So yeah, before my prediction, I predicted 100 to 120, and its final total to reach 350 plus, and it hit that. It definitely hit that. It hit 120 million opening weekend, and it's now reached 364 million as of July 14th. So it still has a little bit to go. Like it still has a little more money to make, which is good because the movie's very profitable. It only costs like $100 million, so it's swimming in profit right now. And compared to the original, it just shot past that. like like the sequel effect was an overdrive for this thing because its opening weekend was over like almost like 3.5 times as much as the first. That you rarely see that ever when it comes to sequels. And worldwide, I wouldn't say it's gonna reach double. It'll be close to double, which is still an incredible increase. So, and when it comes to the live action Spider-Man movies, it's actually in a really good position. It's actually let's see. It's only behind Spider-Man 2, Far From Home, the original Spider-Man, and No Way Home. So the fact that it's on the same and it surpassed Homecoming domestically. So the fact that it was able to be on the same level as the live action Spider-Man movies domestically is fantastic. And when compared to just animated movies in general, it's one of the highest grossing animated movies of all time in the States. I mean, is this it? Is this more is well, this is like I just need like straight up animation, but I don't think you know what this is good enough. So across Spider-Verse, it surpassed Inside Out, Zootopia, Minions, Up, Monsters Inc., Shrek, lots of big movies. So it's on the upper echelon when it comes to animated movies, domestically. Worldwide, not so much, but it really doesn't matter. It's already made its money. So yeah, I wasn't super shocked about this performance because I knew this would do well because of the reputation of its predecessor, the fact that it was being built up as a big summer movie. Like this was supposed to come out in October of last year, then moved to June, which was definitely a good decision in hindsight. Because I don't know how it would have done in October. I'm not sure. But June, it was positioned as a big summer movie, and it really benefited from that. So, yeah. Now, and I watched the movie. Like of all the June movies, this was the one I actually watched. I didn't watch any other June movies. This was the one where I like, okay, I need to see this on the big screen. And I did, and I was blown away by what I experienced. Like from a visual perspective, like goddamn that like it my mind was blown with the visuals. I can't even describe it. It was just it hit different. Okay, it's pretty much how everyone felt with like the original Into the Spider-Verse, how that movie blew people away with its visuals. Across the Spider-Verse, like it hit me more than most movies these days, except maybe Everything Everywhere All at Once. It was like the only movie I can think of that really hit me with the visuals. So yeah, and Across the Spider-Verse is a fantastic movie. It's probably the best movie. No, it is the best movie I've seen all year. I mean, at least yeah, it is the best. I mean, I really like Guardians 3. I really like John Wick 4, but this to me is top tier for now. I still have yet to see Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Okay, that could be another banger. But yeah, right now this is my number 1 for 2023. Now, there's one knock I have against the movie is how the animators were treated while the movie was in production. Yeah, so like a few weeks ago, there was it was revealed that the animators and the artists, working on the movie, they were treated like shit. A lot of them quit because of on uh just bad conditions, just really just ugh, just like the I don't know how my brain's failing me, but yeah, conditions were bad across the board. A lot of people were overworked, underpaid. It sucks. It really sucks. It's a huge bummer because like I know how like when it comes to animators and VFX artists and pretty much like anything that has to do with like art in like the movie world, even the game world, it's rough. It's a very rough job to say the least. Being overworked, underpaid, that is just the worst type of job. I can't even imagine having a job like that. That would be the worst. So the fact that that was happening really made me sad. So I'm hoping with Beyond the Spider-Verse, which is like the the second half of this movie, because this movie is a two-parter. This is just part one. Part two will be Beyond the Spider-Verse. And some people didn't know that. I knew that going into it. So when the movie ended the way it did, I wasn't like super shocked. I was a little bummed, but I wasn't super shocked. But everyone in my theater was like, "No, don't do this to us. What the heck?" They were a little upset. But I mean, this movie was originally called Across the Spider-Verse Part 1, but I guess they wanted the two movies to stand out from each other, so they renamed them. But yeah, but with Beyond the Spider-Verse, I'm hoping it's good, but I'm hoping that the animators and artists are treated better, like they are treated more like human beings. Because, look, I don't want anyone to suffer to make a movie, okay? I'm not that selfish. I'm not gonna tell people, artists, just do your job. Like, I don't want anyone to die just, for a movie that I like. Like, no, that's ridiculous. That's heartless. That's very selfish. I'm hoping so all I'm hoping for Beyond the Spider-Verse is that the animators and artists are treated with more respect, and hopefully the trilogy ends on a high note. But the thing is, we probably won't get, you know, Beyond the Spider-Verse is supposed to come out next March. There's zero chance of that happening, according to some of the artists behind the scenes. There's like, yeah, that's not gonna happen, especially with like the writer's strike and the actors strike that's going on. There's even less of a chance of that being a reality. So we probably won't get Beyond the Spider-Verse until at least, I don't know, 2025, 2026. That's my guess. Um, I don't know. But I'll wait for it. I'm willing to wait for Beyond the Spider-Verse. If it takes a few more years, then I'm totally cool if I do it. Okay, if it makes the movie better, if the animators are treated better, I'm willing to wait a few more years for Beyond the Spider-Verse, because this Spider-Verse trilogy, if Beyond the Spider-Verse lives up to the hype, this trilogy could be one of the best of all time. It could be like the new Toy Story trilogy when it comes to, animated trilogies, because Toy Story trilogy was considered like the best, the cream of the crop. The Spider-Verse trilogy has the potential to either match it or exceed it. Okay? So I'm hoping everything works out with Beyond the Spider-Verse. But Across the Spider-Verse is now the biggest movie of the summer domestically, which is something I didn't expect. I really thought it was going to be Guardians 3 or Mission Possible, but Mission Possible, I don't think that's a possibility anymore. Um, but Across the Spider-Verse is the new number one for summer. It destroyed all the other June movies. So congratulations, Across the Spider-Verse. You earned it. You're a great movie. I just wish the artists were treated better. But yeah, Across the Spider-Verse is the number one movie of the summer. The big W of the summer. Easily. By far and away. So yeah, that was the beginning of June. So June got off to a really, really good start. And with Across the Spider-Verse, I didn't even mention that its opening weekend was the second biggest of the year. Its opening day was the biggest of the year, even more than Mario. Well, Mario, that opened on Wednesday, so it's not a perfect comparison, but still. Across the Spider-Verse, mega hit. So we move on to June 9th, where we have Transformers Rise of the Beast. And I predicted, okay, before I did my prediction video, my expectations for this were not high at all. I didn't think this would do well because, Transformers has had a very uh underwhelming history when it comes to movies. Like a very I don't know what the right word is. A very bad history, let's just say that. Where, like, sure, Transformers 1, 2, 3, and 4 were all successful, they all made money, but the first Transformers was seen as okay, 3 was considered as okay-ish, 2 and 4 are considered garbage, and 5, The Last Night, was not only garbage, but it was a bomb, and it looked like, okay, well, Transformers, it's over, pretty much. But then Bumblebee came out after it, and while it didn't make as much as the others, it was received way better as considered the first good Transformers movie. But still, Transformers had a very it just had a lot of stank surrounding those past movies. A lot of just a very bad reputation. So if Rise of the Beast had to deal with that, not only that, I didn't really feel the hype for this. I was planning on watching it, but then I just didn't because I just didn't have the urge to watch it. Yeah, before it was coming out, I was just like, I don't think this is gonna do well. But then it's Thursday previews happened, and I'm like, okay, maybe this has more of a chance because its Thursday previews were good, like 8.8. So that caused me to increase my prediction to, I believe, 55 to 65 million opening weekend, a final total like 150 plus. And it hit 61 million, which, it reached my expectations. And it's now reached over 150 million domestic, so beat that. So that's good. Although things were looking real dire for a moment for Rise of the Beast because it had a solid opening weekend, then it completely crumbled week 2, falling 66%. I was like, oh no. um that's no good. So I was thinking, okay, we got another bomb on our hands. But then it recovered after that, and now it has reached my expectations. But here's the problem. The thing is, domestically, it actually did better than Bumblebee and The Last Night. But worldwide, it did worse. And its budget was on par with, like, the other non-Bumblebee Transformers movies. So 400 plus million on a budget of 195, that's not ideal at all. This movie needed to make at least 500 million to break even, and it's not going to do that. So technically it's a loss. But I thought it was going to do a lot worse. I was wondering if it'd even make 100 million domestic, but it did. So it's in this weird situation where domestically it's a winner compared to Bumblebee and The Last Night. Worldwide it's a loser. So it's kind of like Little Mermaid, where Little Mermaid 2023, it did pretty well domestically, all things considered. It's one of the biggest movies of the year, but worldwide it's a bomb, it's a dud. So same situation here. So with Rise of the Beast, I mean, it could have done worse, but it could have done a lot better. So I'm gonna label it as a loser, but it's not like an embarrassing loser. It did better than The Flash and Elemental and Indiana Jones, which is something I didn't predict. I didn't predict at all going into June, so there's that. But yeah, overall it's a loser, but it's not an embarrassing loser. The embarrassing losers, we're gonna talk about them very soon. But yeah, at this point in time, June was looking good. And then came June 16th, where everything went wrong. Because on paper, June 16th should have been the biggest weekend of not just summer, but the whole freaking year. On paper. Because you have a big DC movie in The Flash, you got a big Pixar movie in Elemental, you got what I thought was solid counter programming in the form of The Blackening, and plus holdovers with, like, Spider-Verse, and Transformers, and even Little Mermaid to an extent. I thought this weekend would be big, and it was anything but that. So, ugh. So this was, ugh, ugh. So let's just start with the Blackening because it's least offensive of the bunch. It's like the one movie that actually will make its money back, although it still didn't do strong. So with this, I thought it would open in like the double digits. That's what I thought initially, because I thought the movie looks fine. It's going after like a market that is kind of coming back, but not really. Obviously going more gearing like pretty much directly towards the African American demographic, and we haven't seen like too many of those movies recently. But I say like if you have a movie and it appeals to a certain demographic and it clicks with a certain demographic, it can do really well. And I thought this would be it, but it wasn't. So my expectations went down. I predicted an opening weekend of like 5 to 7 million and a final total of like 15 million, I think. And it's reached 6 million, and it's reached like 17 million. So it reached my expectations, but my expectations were really low. I wanted it to do better, but it didn't. So yeah, why it underperformed? I'm not sure. I guess like in this day and age, like when it comes to like what counts as like a theatrical movie and what doesn't, it's changed dramatically because streaming has kind of made things less theatrical. It makes you go like, "Oh, I'll just watch that on streaming instead of like paying to see it in a theater." And I guess for some people they'd rather just watch this like on Netflix or something instead of watching it on the big screen. That's what I think. So yeah, kind of like the mid-range movie has suffered a lot because of streaming. And maybe this was one of those casualties. I don't know. Or maybe people just weren't that interested in the first place. Because like I thought it had a good release date. Like it had the Juneteenth release date, right? And the movie, it's centered around like Juneteenth weekend where like the plot happens. And I thought that would really help it, but it just didn't. And I'm just like, oh well, shoot. But this movie cost like nothing to make. I think it was like $5 million, so it's not like it's gonna lose money. But I really thought it would have done better. But at least it wasn't Elemental or The Flash. Okay, at least it wasn't those. So let's talk about them. Elemental. Ooh. Oh God. Okay. So Elemental. I My expectations for this were very low from the beginning because the Pixar brand, like Pixar used to be like the top name like for animation. Like it was like the top of the food chain. Well, from like the first Toy Story to the third Toy Story, they were number uno. Like they were doing really well. All their movies, even Cars, were doing extremely well financially. Many of their movies are seen as classics nowadays, like the Toy Story 1, 2, and 3, Monsters University, no, Monsters Inc., Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, Wall-E, Ratatouille, Up, all bangers. But then things changed in the 2010s. Cars 2 happened. That was considered Pixar's first critical flop. Still did well financially, but still, it was considered their first bad movie. Then Brave and Monsters University were seen as okay. Then Inside Out was considered really, really good. But then The Good Dinosaur was considered okay, and that was Pixar's first flop financially. Then Finding Dory and Incredibles 2 and Toy Story 4 are seen as fine movies generally, but they're considered to be worse than their predecessors. And then Cars 3 happened, and that's all I'm going to say about that. And Coco was received very well and was very successful. But yeah, the 2010s was a very mixed bag for Pixar. But there's nothing compared to the 2020s. It's been an utter catastrophe. Onward was seen as okay and it had a very underwhelming opening weekend, but then it was killed completely thanks to COVID. So that movie was a victim of bad timing. And then the next three movies after that, Soul, Luca, Turning Red, were all dumped on the Disney Plus, which pretty much devalued the brand entirely. And then last year we had Lightyear, which was expected to be a hit because it's Buzz Lightyear. It's part of the Toy Story brand. How could it not do well? And then it was an utter bomb, a bomb that shocked me to my core, where it just oh, it was an utter disaster for numerous reasons. So because of Lightyear's flop, it made me very apprehensive about Elemental, and yeah. So opening weekend, I predicted 30 to 35 million, which is a record low for Pixar, like near record low, would be near record low for Pixar, mainly because I thought the marketing wasn't very good. It didn't convince me at all to watch it. I know Pixar movies historically have bad marketing, but this was especially bad. Like, there was no real reason to rush out to see this thing. And not to mention, it debuted at Cannes, had a very lukewarm response, and I'm like, well, that's it. It's dead. It's over. Because usually, if you premiere your movie like well in advance, most studios do it if they know their movie is really, really good. To have advanced buzz going into when the movie actually releases. So when this movie had very like 60%, it was like the review score was at 60% when they debuted at Cannes. I was like, well, Disney, you killed this movie. Congratulations. um, so yeah. And my expectations were rock bottom, but it actually did worse than that. Opened with 29.6, which is actually, I believe, the worst or very close to the worst for Pixar. Because I believe only the first Toy Story, yes, the first Toy Story did worse. And that movie came out almost 30 years ago. So, and that movie only cost like 30 million when compared to Elemental's 200 million. So, I was thinking, dear God, like a this is a new level of catastrophic. Um, it did even worse than Lightyear, which was already a bomb. So I was thinking, man, is this the death of Pixar? Is this the death of Pixar? So yeah, things were looking hella bleak for Elemental. And I predicted a final total of 100 million, but after that opening weekend, I was like, I don't know about 100 million anymore. But to my surprise, this movie has gotten very good legs. Really good legs. It it almost was number one in its second weekend. Spider-Verse beat it. I forgot to mention that. Across the Spider-Verse was number one in its fourth weekend. Like, it was number one, then number two, to number three, and then it popped back to number one, which is great. You don't see that very often. But that should really tell you how piss poor things were at that point. But yeah, had a good second weekend, and ever since, its legs have been really strong. And hell, like, it's Friday, like yesterday, a 13% drop Friday to Friday. Can you believe that? That's crazy. And it's now made 119 million, which is better than Lightyear. It's already surpassed it worldwide, so there's that. And it also made more than The Flash, which is something I never, ever would have guessed going into June. And I mean, those are positives, but it doesn't change the fact the movie, it dug itself into a hole so deep that it was going to be impossible for it to get out of it. So, yeah, while the movie, it's not as big as a bomb as I thought it was going to be, or at least, after opening weekend, it's kind of saved itself, but not really. Like, not at all in the grand scheme of things. But at least it's not another Strange World, because that's why I thought we were going to get another Strange World-esque bomb, but it avoided that. So there's that. Oh, but I have to mention the marketing for this movie. Another thing with the marketing. Oh, man. So, when the movie was flopping, or when it was doing really, really bad, Disney decided to have, like, these fake like trailer, not trailer, movie theater reactions where like there's like this whole genre on YouTube. You've probably seen videos like this where people like record like the audience's reaction to a movie, like certain scenes and moments. Like there are plenty of videos like that out there. And Disney decided to do that with this, but the way they did it was so weird, where they're like, promoting like Claude, this thing right here on the bottom right of the screen, this little thing with a flower, that's Claude, and they were like, "Oh, look how the audience responds to Claude," and I'm just like, "The fuck is a Claude?" Like, how is this sell your movie? Like, what is this? Like, the whole thing felt so fake and so desperate that it made me laugh. But apparently, maybe that had a positive impact on the movie. Maybe that convinced people to watch it. I don't know. But I just had to mention that because it was so absurd and so strange to witness that. Um, but also, this movie apparently is done really well in South Korea. So that's another positive, I guess. And the thing is, like, its opening weekend worldwide was like 44 million. So yeah, but the fact that it's reached this much after that really shows that this movie has some longevity. The problem is it started so low that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's not like Puss in Boots. Like, at least that cost like half as much as this. But at least Puss in Boots, had a longer. I mean, Puss in Boots had a long life. Like Last Wish had a very long life. But Elemental, it was too late. Nothing was gonna save it. But who knows? Maybe it'll do really well when it hits Disney Plus later. I imagine it will. Kind of like what happened with Encanto. So yeah, Elemental, a bomb, but it could have done a lot worse. Speaking of a lot worse, The Flash. All right. My prediction video for this, I made like a 40 something minute prediction video for this because there was so much to discuss. But I'm going to keep it somewhat minimum. I'm going to, just give you the cliff notes. So The Flash, when it was coming out, had a lot of problems to deal with. First of all, the DCU, dead brand. It was already shaky beforehand. A lot of their movies were considered mediocre or just straight up bad, with some exceptions like Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Shazam. So like, everything from like Man of Steel, from Man of Steel to Shazam, things were mid at best. But after that, things took a bad turn. Birds of Prey flopped. Then the HBO Max experiment happened and COVID. Those two things pretty much killed Wonder Woman 1984 and the Suicide Squad. Which when Wonder Woman Wonder Woman 1984, that was deserved because the movie sucked ass. It was trash. But the Suicide Squad, I will never, ever get over the fact that society let that movie fail. Like, that should not have happened in a ideal world, but it failed, and that makes me really sad. Still makes me sad to this day because it's so good. It deserved better. And then Black Adam underperformed quite badly last year. That was Warner Brothers tried really hard to make that a blockbuster, and it refused to happen. And then this year there was Shazam: Fury of the Gods, which was an absolute catastrophe financially. Like, that just was a true embarrassment. So things were going great for the Flash. Like, when it came to its franchise, it was going bad. So Flash had to deal with that. Not only that, like, the DCU is going to be rebooted in 2 years, so that pretty much makes this and all the other 2023 DCU movies worthless. Absolutely worthless. So you got to deal with that. And there's also Ezra Miller. Ezra Miller, you all know about Ezra Miller and what they've done the past few years, particularly last year with all of their arrest and, bad PR and really disturbing allegations, with Ezra being alleged to be, have like this, I don't know, like child abduction. I think it was child abduction. I think it was grooming. It's another accusation. Some pretty bad stuff you never want to be associated with. So the Flash had to deal with that baggage. And so yeah, those like the two well really the two big things were the franchise itself and Ezra Miller. Those are the two things that this movie had to deal with. And Warner Brothers, I remember like they were trying like they had this really weird strategy where they tried to push like they try to proclaim this as like the greatest superhero movie of all time. Like this is it. This is the peak of the genre. Like James Gunn did it, David Zaloff did it, even people outside of Warner Brothers like Tom Cruise, Stephen King. It was really strange. It felt very desperate to say the least. And that just I kind of knew that was phony. I didn't believe it for a second. I just feel like they were trying to save this sinking ship. So yeah, that had to deal with weird marketing like that. And oh, I should mention something. In my prediction video, the thumbnail for that video, what I said like in the thumbnail, that pretty much came from a costume designer for The Flash, where they said like, "Oh, this movie is so good it'll make you forget Ezra's crimes" or something like that. That stuck with me because I couldn't believe someone would actually say that unironically. Um, so that stuck with me, and I just had to reference that in my thumbnail. I just had to, because that is a wild take to say the least. So yeah, when this movie was coming out, it had a lot going against it, and it was projected to reach like 100 million like initially, but then as the weeks went on, the predictions that they just dropped and dropped and dropped to reaching like 70 million. And that's where I thought it would reach. I thought it would reach like 65 to 75 million, which wouldn't have been good at all considering the budget, considering Warner Brothers were clearly positioning this as like the big movie of the summer, probably even more than Guardians 3 or Across the Spider-Verse. But no, that 65 to 75, that never happened. It opened with 55 million. 55 million for The Flash. To put that in perspective, okay, it did worse than Black Adam, which was, Black Adam was just, Shazam's villain, like solo villain movie. Like it did worse than that. It did worse than The Eternals, which opened with 71 million. It did worse than the first Ant-Man when no one knew what Ant-Man was. It did worse than that. That opened with 57 million. And even more damning, its debut was on par with another infamous DC bomb from back in the day, Green Lantern. And Green Lantern is probably the most appropriate prediction comparison for The Flash, because Green Lantern, that had to deal with problems, that had to deal with a really shitty marketing campaign, that had to deal with just a lack of audience interest, had to deal with bad CGI because both this and The Flash had really shitty CGI. And Warner Brothers tried hard to make Green Lantern a thing, and it refused to happen. And the movie was an utter catastrophe, opening with like 53 million, had awful legs, and it only made 219 million on a budget of 200 million. So, yeah, you never want to be compared to Green Lantern ever in any circumstances. Now, The Flash, I have to go back to The Flash. Now, The Flash, it did surpass Green Lantern worldwide, but not by much. But domestically, it's actually going to do worse. Because the thing is, my final prediction for this movie, I thought it would hit like 150. And it's only made 106. And it hasn't even doubled its opening weekend. Like, this movie's legs have been horrendous, to say the least. It had like a 9.7 preview number, then 24 million opening day, which isn't a good sign. Then it fell 36% the next day. It fell a little bit, only like 1% for Sunday, but that was because it was Father's Day. And then it just fell and fell and fell after that. And then it fell to 81% Friday to Friday. Had a second weekend drop of 72%, which is one of the worst of the whole genre. I think only Morbius and Steel did worse. So, being in the same sentence as those, never good. And then it just kept falling, man. 65% third week, 57% fourth week, and now it's most recent Friday hit another 69%. So yeah, this movie's pretty much out of theaters at this point, and it won't even reach 110. It won't reach that at all. So, and how this 106 total, that's pretty much on par with what I gotta find it. Ant-Man 3. Yeah, Ant-Man 3 opened with. Yeah, Ant-Man 3 opened with 106. Literally, The Flash's total has reached Ant-Man 3's 3-day haul. Ant-Man 3 wasn't a hit at all. Like, that movie flopped. It had awful legs, just like The Flash, and only made like less than 500 million. But The Flash, it wishes it had Ant-Man 3 money. It wishes it made that money. Because this is so much worse in comparison. And in fact, its numbers are so bad, it's projected to be the biggest bomb in Warner Brothers history, losing $200 million. It lost $200 million. Like, wow. Like, it's so... it's unbelievable. But I'm really glad this happened. I'm really happy it went down because this is karma for Warner Brothers, because they really should have known better than to keep Ezra in the DCEU. They should have dropped them as soon as, like, I think even before all this stuff that happened last year in 2020. I believe Ezra like choked out a woman like on video. That should have been the moment where Warner Brothers said, "You know what? We don't want this. We don't want you. Bye-bye." They should have done that, but they didn't for some godforsaken reason. They just kept Ezra along. Even after everything that happened last year, they were still insistent on releasing the movie. They didn't want to like cancel it or anything. Apparently the producers were like, "Oh, that was never on the table." But if you ask me, they should have like that really should if I was in charge of Warner Brothers and all that shit was going down, I would have buried The Flash. I would have buried it. Or I would have just put it on Max. I would have just cut my losses and just avoid all the embarrassment. I would have just done that. But no, Warner Brothers were insistent on releasing this worldwide because they believed they had a winner on their hands, because they're like, "Hey, we brought back Michael Keaton as Batman. You all love him." And to be fair, that kind of worked for a little bit, because when the trailer dropped, all anyone talked about was Michael Keaton's Batman. You could literally look at the comments section. Literally all the comments were about Michael Keaton's Batman. And that was like the one thing people were looking forward to, but that was never enough. It wasn't enough, and it was never enough. I mean, sure, there was Supergirl, but apparently in the movie she was useless. She was just there as a plot point. She didn't have much of a purpose being there. Then the whole multiverse thing, I think people have gotten really tired of multiverses because it's been done to death recently. And people are just burned out from like the concept. Like the only movie that really works, that I mean, I guess there's across like the Spider-Verse movies, people are cool with those. And I guess Deadpool 3, people would be cool with that, but the problem is that movie stopped production because of the actor strike. So who knows when they'll start up again. I don't even know how much of that they filmed. But yeah, but when it comes to multiverses, people are just kind of done with multiverses. But yeah, so there's that, and then there's all this stuff that they didn't, all like the cameos that they straight up spoiled before the movie, like Nicolas Cage's Superman, from the canceled movie Superman Lives. That was just they just they just spoiled it like it was nothing. Like they just let the cat out of the bag like way in advance. Like this is not what happened with No Way Home. They kept that shit like like airtight. Like they didn't want any big information to come out. Like with Toby and Andrew, like we all knew they were going to be in the movie, but Sony and Marvel, they made damn sure not to show anything like that. Like they pretty much made Andrew Garfield deny everything. But before the movie came out, so like, could you imagine No Way Home if they just straight up said, "Oh, Toby and Andrew are in the movie"? That would have killed so much surprise. That would have killed the impact immediately. But The Flash, they're just like, "Here's Michael Keaton's Batman." Like, wouldn't it have been cool to see that in the movie instead of just showing it in the first trailer. Like, just, I don't know, like, this is kind of crude way of saying it, but they blew their load pretty much by showing off all the cameos and everything, like, before the movie came out. Like, that was just a bad call. And there's also another thing with the cameos. The uh some of the cameos were seen as in very bad taste because some of the actors were dead. Like Christopher Reeves is Superman. He was brought into the movie and they did like this weird, disturbing deep fake of him. Like, I didn't watch the movie because I was never gonna watch this movie because of what Ezra did. I boycotted it pretty much. Even if Ezra didn't do what they did, I would have been very apprehensive about it because I never liked Ezra Miller's Flash from the beginning. I thought they were just a bad choice. Um, just like Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor, I thought they were just a bad casting choice. But with, like, anyway, back to the cameo of that. A lot of people thought it was gross, disgusting, immoral, evil, vile. A term I've heard was digital necromancy. So people were very much turned off by that, as they should, because that shit is gross and disgusting. And then there's also like a scene in the movie where like Ezra Miller, like Flash, like they save babies by putting them in microwaves. I found that out via Twitter, and I was just like, is this a metaphor for something? Because this feels like a metaphor. It has to be a metaphor. There's no way they just put that in not knowing what it was, not knowing what they were doing. But yeah, just this movie had just everything going against it, and it bombed. The biggest bomb of the summer easily, because with Elemental, you can label that as, oh, that's just a one-off from Pixar. This was supposed to be a big franchise movie, the big boy franchise movie for Warner Brothers. They thought they had a winner, and they ended up getting the biggest loser. So, what's gonna happen with the Flash? I mean, Warner Brothers has been radio silent regarding the Flash's future on film. Um, I'd be amazed if we saw Ezra Miller's Flash ever again after this movie. I'd be stunned beyond all belief. But yeah, The Flash, a huge disaster, an undisputed disaster, and there's nothing more. Every Everyone has said everything about this movie, and but The Flash, I'm just done with it. So yeah, June 16th, awful, 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 awful. And then we move on to June 23rd, which wasn't as bad, but it was still pretty lackluster. But at least the two movies that came out didn't embarrass themselves. So it was that. But first, Asteroid City. Wes Anderson's latest flick had a huge cast and everything, which is typical for a Wes Anderson movie. It had a very weird, distinct Wes Anderson style to it. And when it was coming out, I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know how it was going to do. I predicted an opening weekend of like 7 million, and it's told to reach like 20 million. And, the movie opened really well in limited release. Actually, the best for any movie since 2019. And then when it opened wide, it actually did better than I thought. It opened with like 9 million. I was like, wow, that's really good. Maybe there's hope for indie movies out there, for like smaller movies. Its legs have been pretty mediocre since, which I imagine because of word of mouth, because word of mouth's been kind of mid for this movie. So obviously that was going to lead the long legs. But right now it's hit like 25 million domestic, 41 million worldwide, on a budget I believe it's like 25 million. So it's not exactly a hit, but I wouldn't label it as a bomb either. It's more like mid. But compared to like Wes Anderson's last movie, which I have to find, which was, what was it? What was it? French Dispatch. It did a lot better. It did a lot better than that. And Asteroid City's wide release was the best of Wes Anderson's career. That 9 million total, that was the best of his whole career. So I would say the movie did fine for what it is, but overall it is pretty mid. Its performance is mid, but for what it is, it's fine. It's just fine. And there's not much else to really say about it. It just did fine. So yeah, that was Asteroid City. Now, no hard feelings. Let's talk about this. So no hard feelings, like a hard R comedy, that one of those we haven't seen in ages. And with this, I thought it had sleeper potential. I really did. I looked at the trailer and I was like, this could this do well? Maybe. I mean, the premise, it has like the potential for like it has some potential for comedy. Like, I could see potential there. Although I might as well say just right now that a lot of people, some people have complained about the premise, how it's creepy in a way where Jennifer Lawrence, who's like in her 30s, is like dating, putting that in air quotes, dating. I mean, hell, the synopsis puts it in air quotes. Like that 19-year-old kid. He's actually 21 in real life. So yeah, like that age gap kind of may have turned some people off. And I'm not a humongous fan of the age gap. I think it's a little weird, but I've seen weirder. Okay, I mean, look at TLC shows. 90 Day Fiance. I'm pretty sure you all have heard of that at least by now. I mean, there are some pretty significant age gaps, on that show. I think one of the more infamous people of that show, Big Ed, with his lack of a neck, he was like with Rose. There was like a 30-year difference between them. Like he was like 53, she was like 23. Like he literally could have been old enough to be her dad. Like literally, he was in his 30s when she was born. So I think that's a lot worse in comparison. But at least like with this, and this isn't like say like a cuties situation, okay, where everyone was underage doing these very, very inappropriate things. It's not like that at all, because the actor of Percy is of age in the movie and in real life, so it's nowhere near as bad as that. But it's so the whole thing is weird, but it's not the worst thing out there. Okay, there's far worse out there. So I just had to mention that because some people mentioned that like for a while, but yeah, had to mention it. So predictions. I predicted 15 to 20 million for this and a final total of 50 million, which I thought would be like okay, considering like R-rated comedies have pretty much died in the last few years. I'm still not super sure why that happened. Maybe it's because of the quality, maybe it's because people could get the same type of comedy online for free. I don't know. But yeah, so I predicted 15 to 20 million and it hit 15 million barely. So it reached my expectations. And its legs have been pretty decent and it's now reached let's see, 44 million. So it should realistically hit 50 million. It should be around that, which is fine for a movie like this. Like compared to all the other June movies, well, most of the other June movies, this performance is great. um, but its budget was like 45 million, so it's probably not going to make a whole lot of profit. It probably won't break even, not now, maybe later when it hits like PVOD and the ancillary markets. But overall, I say its performance, it did okay. It merely did okay, especially compared to other R-rated comedies we've seen the last, or hell, comedies in general we've seen in the last few years. This is actually better than average, which is a really sad thought because comedies, especially R-rated comedies, used to do so well, so well. Like a decade ago, they were killing it. Like say in 2011, you had Bridesmaids, Hangover Part 2, Horrible Bosses, Bad Teacher. All of those made like 100 million plus domestic. Like the genre was thriving back then, and now it's just nothing. So yeah, but with this performance, it could have been worse. a month is bad when literally the best thing I could say about a lot of these movies is that it could have been worse. It's not like, oh, it did good. No, it could have been worse. That's a weak compliment, but it's a compliment. So yeah, no hard feelings. It did fine. That's how I would describe that and Asteroid City. They both did okay-ish for what they are. So that was June 23rd. Wasn't as bad as June 16th, but things were still very depressing. And one would think, okay, maybe at the end of the month, things will finally improve. You'd be dead wrong. It just got worse. So June 30th. Okay, so Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Oof. All right, so Indy 5. I wasn't exactly looking forward I don't think too many people were looking forward to this movie when it came to its box office, I did not. My expectations were pretty low. But the thing is, like, when I made like polls, because I make polls like on the channel with the community tab, when I make like polls, see like how you thought this movie would do well, a decent amount of you thought this movie would succeed, which I thought was really weird. I didn't understand that because like this movie had a lot going against it, really. I mean, Lucasfilm, oh boy, they've been struggling for like a while, especially the last few years. I mean, the Star Wars sequel trilogy, like it started out fine with Force Awakens, and then it quickly fell apart with The Last Jedi. Then it ended with the absolute farce that was Rise of Skywalker, and not to mention, well, Rogue One did well. Solo was an utter bomb. So yeah, Star Wars was pretty much killed. And then there's all the Disney Plus shows, which, The Mandalorian was going good until season 3, where that pretty much killed the show. Book of Boba Fett was a waste. Kenobi was a serious disappointment for many. Andor was good, but that wasn't enough. And then Willow, Willow, that's not a part of Star Wars. It's another property of Lucasfilm, a forgotten property from like the 80s. Willow was an absolute embarrassment. Everyone hated that show, and now it disappeared from Disney Plus. They yeeted it off the service, so you can't watch it anymore. So, yeah. So Lucasfilm's track record the last decade, less than ideal. And then with Indiana Jones, I mean, the first 3 movies are considered classics, but then you had Indy 4, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and 15 years ago. That had a lot of hype because, oh, Indiana Jones is back. Harrison Ford's back as a character. You got Steven Spielberg, George Lucas. This is going to be great. And the movie wasn't what anyone wanted it to be. Had, Nuke in the Fridge. That's an infamous moment in that movie. That pretty much became the movie's whole legacy. Pretty much how, like, the prequels, the Star Wars prequels, like, their whole legacy is pretty much about Anakin being, like, having, like, the worst writing. Anakin, hating sand. There's Jar Jar Binks. Just a lot of bad stuff with the prequels. And Indy 4 had pretty much that, with, like, nuking the fridge and aliens, and it wasn't good. So Indy 5 had to deal with the baggage that was Indy 4. And then the big thing, when this movie debuted at Cannes in May, reaction was really bad. It was like at 49% at a time. Granted, the score improved after that, but still, it had a really rough premiere, which, like I said with Elemental, pretty much killed the movie right then and there, because why would you premiere a movie so far in advance like that when you knew the movie probably wasn't going to be very good? Why would you do that? That's suicide. That's just box office suicide right there. And then just, so after that premiere, the movie basically just limped along through its marketing campaign, and then it came out. So with its opening weekend, I predicted like 55 to 65, I think. Yeah, the same range I predicted with Transformers. And it hit 60 million, which is not a good thing considering the budget's 300 million. And its final total, I don't think I mentioned the final total. I think I probably would have said like 150 plus, just like Transformers. And it will definitely reach that But compared to the other Indiana Jones movies, this is horrible. It's horrible, especially compared to Indy 4. Like Indiana, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, as much of a as hated as it is, people watched it. A lot of people watched it. It opened with like 100 million opening weekend. It had like a 5 day total of 151 million. Like Indiana Jones, like Indy 5 in comparisons, 5 day total because it opened on a holiday. That a 5 day total of 83 million. So literally, actually, I want to compare it to Indy 4. I could compare it to The Flash, which is not a huge compliment, but it's something. It's like Indy 4 like made more in 3 days than Indy 5 made in 5 days. And hell, at this point, actually, Indy 5 has made less total in like almost 3 weeks than Indy 4 made in 5 days. Think about that. That's horrible. That is just I mean, look at this. It's like 100 million behind right now, and that gap is only going to widen. And then compared to the other Indiana Jones movies, like, it's going to do worse than the originals in raw dollars. I can't even begin to explain how horrible, how tragic, how... No, tragic is something I'd use for something that deserved to do well when it didn't. Just how abysmal, that's a better word, how abysmal this is compared to the originals. Like, this is truly catastrophic. Just like The Flash, it's pretty much in the same position as The Flash, where it's the biggest bomb of the summer. It's pretty much tied with The Flash when it comes to being the biggest bomb of the summer. So, like, yeah, and when it comes to, like, Lucasfilm, like, I don't see them... I mean, this, like, after the sequel trilogy with Star Wars, like, this was, like, their first, like, theatrical release since. So I imagine they were really hoping this would do well. But it did so bad that I don't really see a future for Lucasfilm. I wouldn't be surprised if people started getting fired, like, in mass after this result. So, yeah, like, I know there were, like, rumors of Kathleen Kennedy being fired. Apparently those rumors weren't true, but, like, come on, like, you can only... I don't see how she's still there. I don't see how she's still running the ship. In my opinion, like, you can only fuck up so many times before someone says, enough is enough, get out. Like, you can only deal with so much failure that someone's gotta say enough's enough. So, I don't know. The future for Lucasfilm is bleak as all hell, just like DC, and just like Pixar, too. All their futures are in a bad state right now. I mean, Transformers is kind of in that same ballpark, but not really. I mean, you got the Transformers 1 movie coming out next year, supposedly. As long as that doesn't get... If that even gets affected by the actor strike. It just might. It probably will. I don't know. I don't know how far that movie is when it comes to development or production. But yeah, Transformers is a relatively healthy spot in comparison to Flash and Elemental and Indy 5, Dial of Destiny. So, I mean, there's that. But yeah, Indy 5, bomb and a half. Like, Jesus. There is nothing positive I can say about it. Nothing. At least Elemental had good legs. Indy 5 is not having those. So, yeah. So that was like the big bust of June 30th. But that wasn't the only bust. We have Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken. That was another huge bomb that came out. Not as big, but a huge flop. Now, my prediction, I predicted, I don't know, 10 million, I think, opening weekend. I don't remember exactly. I think it was like 7 to 10 million, something like that. This movie wishes it made that. No, it was 5 to 7 million, I think. I don't remember. But the numbers were like ridiculously low. and it hit 5.5 million opening weekend, which is just I absolutely horrific, which is, kind of crazy because DreamWorks before this, they were on a little bit of a hot streak. Only The Bad Guys was received well and it made a decent amount of money. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, that underwhelmed its opening weekend, but it found an audience later on, and it just went on and on and on and on for weeks, and it eventually became a huge hit. So you think after those two movies that would help Ruby Gillman? Nope, not at all. Its legs have been pretty lackluster after that, and it's pretty much, it lost like half its theaters. It's not gonna live to see the end of the month at this point. Um, it's only made like 13.6 million. I think my final total was like 20 million. I think so. It's not gonna reach 20 million. I don't see that happening. So it's worldwide. It's reached like 30 million on the budget up to 70 million. Yikes! Oof, this movie's gonna lose some money. Maybe not as much as Flash or Elemental or Indy 5, but it's gonna lose money. So why did this happen? I don't know. The marketing seemed very lackluster, like super lackluster. The movie was literally announced like in March, and then it was released in June. That was like 3 months between announcement and release. You need more than that. You need at least 6 months to a year in order to do that. And then the marketing just, it never made this movie look like an event. It never made this movie look like something you had to see on the big screen. A lot of people were saying the movie style looked like the corporate art style, which is really not good. And just the fact that no one cared and no one showed up. So, or some people didn't even know this movie existed because that's how bad the marketing was. Um, so yeah, this movie had to deal with a lot of bad things, and because of those bad things, it tanked very hard. So who knows? Maybe this will be a cult classic in the future because it wasn't. It was reviewed okay. People thought it was fine, but that wasn't enough. It bombed, and that's the end of that. Did worse than Elemental, which I actually expected because at least Elemental was marketed like way better than this. And Elemental's marketing wasn't even good, but at least people knew Elemental existed to an extent. Ruby Gillman, no one knew that thing was out, pretty much. And then last and but least, Past Lives. I'm not gonna go into too much detail about this. I predicted an opening weekend of like 1 to 1.3 million or something like that, because it had like a limited release. Then it went wide the June 30th. It hit 1.6, so it was that. And its final total, I think it was like 10 million. It may or may not reach 10 million. I'm not sure, but I mean, for a movie like this, for a very like for like a very small movie like this, these results are okay. They're not spectacular or anything, but it's fine. It's just fine. And that's pretty much it. So that was June. A lot of negativity, I know. Uh it was a very rough month to get through, especially me, looking at the box office results. I was just like, "Oh my god, what's going on? Why is everything getting worse?" It was rough to get through. So, yeah, but I'm glad it's over. I'm glad it's in the rearview mirror. So now we're in July, and things have been comparatively better. I mean, Sound of Freedom has become the little movie that could. Like, that movie's destroying all expectations, especially for a movie that was very much under the radar before it came out. Insidious: The Red Door's doing well. Joyride's a bust. Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1 is not the hit that I thought it would be, and that's really disheartening. Maybe it'll have good legs, I don't know, but so far it's not looking great. And then next week we have Barbenheimer coming out, Barbie and Oppenheimer. Those should do well, thanks to both movies having positive buzz and being meme movies. Both movies being so different from each other, they've been grouped together, and people are actually planning on watching them both back to back. Like, people are actually planning on doing that. So both movies can actually, I think they're actually benefiting each other, honestly, with these memes. So those should do well. And then you got Haunted Mansion, which looks like another Disney bomb in my eyes. And then Talk to Me, I don't know about that. Yeah, that's July. Not a whole lot going on in July, but compared to June, it's a godsend compared to June. Um, so yeah, so that's it. That's all. Make sure to subscribe, like this video, leave a comment, turn notifications, share the whole drill. Want to check out more videos like this? I got playlists on the homepage, all previous uh recap videos I made this year. Want to watch any of the ones I've done this year, the past few years? Want to watch any of them? Go right ahead. There's also uh yeah, box office predictions where I predict box office for movies. I've done prediction videos for pretty much everything here, everything I mentioned, I talked about. So you want to watch my prediction videos for all of those, you can go right ahead. There's also the cancel series where I go over all the movies that were supposed to come out but didn't. I know I covered Boogeyman, Across the Spider-Verse, Rise of the Beast, Blackening, Elemental, The Flash, No Hard Feelings, Asteroid City, Indiana Jones, and Ruby Gillman. I covered all of them at least more once on when it came to the cancel series. So, and there's now like 196 episodes. Although I imagine that episode count is going to increase dramatically because of this actor strike, which pretty much shut down all productions, including Deadpool 3. So, um, yeah, I would fully expect cancel episodes to come any day now because of these strikes. So you want to watch, but if you want to watch any of the past cancel episodes, I've done all 196 episodes. You want to watch them all from beginning to now, I highly encourage you to do that. So go do it. And yeah, that's it. That's all. I am out. Goodbye.